Morning. Back for another video on a beautiful Wednesday morning. Hope you're all doing well. Today I wanted to talk about atheism. And so to start off, this morning I was watching a video as I was, getting my coffee, waking up, going through my morning routine, by one of my favorite YouTube channels called Millennial Woes. I believe he's out of Scotland. He's a Scotsman. And he's a millennial and a philosopher of sorts. At least he seems very educated in philosophy. Very intelligent guy. Has a lot of great things to say. I don't agree with everything he says, and one of the things he said in his video this morning is something I just don't agree with. Now, this guy is religious. Well, rather than describe him, let me just describe the topic of his video and then what he said that I didn't agree with, and then explain why. So the topic of his video, the title, I believe, it's called The Right Not to Be Offended. And he goes through a handful of these atheists in Western society who have coined these phrases, such as, I can't remember the name of the guy that said it in the 80s, but Ricky Gervais, I think, is it. Something along the lines of, you don't have the right to be offended. And basically, just because you're offended doesn't mean you're right. Okay, now, he was explaining that the mechanism of offense is there for a reason, and maybe we don't know what that is. But if something says someone that triggers a response in somebody, maybe there's a purpose behind it. Maybe there's something going on. There's something that is taking damage as a result of what you've said. And the one thing I will agree with him on is these figures like Christopher Hitchens and the like. He's never really liked them. He considers them smug and kind of arrogant, and I agree. When people talk to me about atheism, I totally get why they start getting defensive, because these, populist figures in the atheist community really are kind of smug and arrogant and condescending. So I try and keep that in mind when I'm talking about atheism. Now, obviously, yes, I am an atheist. And one of the things he says in his video is that bringing atheism into a society does damage to that society. And he went on to describe why he felt it does damage. But it was that key phrase that he used that caught my attention and really made me think about where his mind is coming from, where his viewpoint is coming from. Bringing atheism into a society. Okay, now I can tell you exactly how I became an atheist, and nobody had to bring it to me. It came about organically, naturally, from in here. And the reason I became an atheist, or the reason I discovered I was an atheist, is because I didn't believe the other humans that told me there was such a thing as God. Okay? It isn't God that lacks the credibility. It's the humans that keep on insisting that such a thing exists that lacks the credibility with me. Okay? If you're telling me, yes, God exists, God says this, God that, it's not God I have a problem with, wherever that thing might be. It's you. Okay? Just like if you tried to convince me there's such a thing as Santa Claus. It's not Santa Claus I take issue with. He lacks no credibility in my mind. He's a figment of the collective imagination. Just like God. It's you, the person trying to tell me that Saint Nick exists, that lacks the credibility. It's you telling me that are the person I don't believe. Now, do I think you're lying? No, not necessarily. I think you may genuinely believe what you're claiming, right? But it's your claim that has no credibility. It's you and you making that claim that has zero credibility with me. Why? Because I see everybody making the same claim and no one producing any evidence. Zilch. None. Nada. Okay, now you can look at the natural world and go, well, there's the evidence that God exists. Okay, well, that's debatable. Now we're going into a psychological rabbit hole that gets away from the observable world, from observable reality. Now, I don't have a problem with anybody claiming that, and you can try all day long to convince me, as long as it doesn't take up my time, and as long as it doesn't get into this, heated argument or a clash. Right? I have no interest in clashing with religious people. I used to. Over time, I did something called maturing. And that's kind of important. Not just for me, but for everybody that thinks about these things. You've got to leave room to have your worldview shaken. To have your cage rattled a little bit. Okay? To be willing to accept that maybe things aren't quite the way you thought they were all along. Well, I try and be good at that. I try and be efficient and proficient at that mental gymnastic activity because I feel it's important. So, as I was saying, I don't have a problem with you trying to convince me there's such a thing as God. Okay? What I do have a problem with is when a person assigns value to me and to my life based on whether or not I believe in God. And that almost inevitably happens in every case. Anytime somebody starts talking about atheism in a context where, and there's a few that I take umbrage with. Number one, some of the most mass genocidal murderers in history happen to have been atheists. And so, therefore, atheism is evil. Atheism is a religion, right? I'm sorry, atheism is not a religion. Atheism is being without a religion, without a theology. In other words, I don't take on that delusion. I don't adopt and manage and internalize and maintain that delusion. Many other people do. I can't imagine what a chore that must be. But when those people begin to assign value to me and my life, and by the way, all those mass murderers in history, Stalin, Lenin, Pol Pot, Hitler, yes, they might have been atheists. In fact, I'm not sure whether Hitler was an atheist or a Christian. I have yet to read Mein Kampf. Maybe someday, I don't know. But they didn't do those atrocities in the name of atheism. No, they did those atrocities in the name of power, right? Exercising and accumulating and desiring power over other people. It isn't in the name of atheism. They weren't trying to spread an atheist message. They were trying to spread the message that I control you. That's what they were trying to spread. So, let's knock this nonsense off about atheism being a root cause of mass genocide throughout the world. It's simply not true. Now, it's that sentiment that people will use as an excuse to assign value to another person's life or their worth because they're an atheist. Because they have this thing that they can point to and say, oh yeah, all these people, and it's false, of course, but whether or not they admit that, they still have that to point to because the idea is upheld by society at large that atheism is the cause of all these atrocities in the world. So therefore they can assign value to me and my worth and my life because I'm an atheist. I'm sorry, that's bullshit. Just because I'm an atheist doesn't mean that I don't have morals. I very much do have morals. Just because I'm an atheist doesn't mean that I don't have empathy. I very much do have empathy. Just because I'm an atheist doesn't mean that I don't contribute to society. I have contributed to this society. Just because I'm an atheist doesn't mean that I don't have any intellectual ability. I think I do have some intellectual ability. So, if you're religious, and if you run into somebody like me who is an atheist, and you get into a discussion with them about the existence or the non-existence of God. Just remember, please, stop short of assigning value to that person or their life or their worth based on the fact that they're an atheist. Okay, it is offensive. Now, I personally am not going to take offense to that, but I am going to call you out on it and tell you, here's why you're wrong. And I just explained why you're wrong. So, understand that it's not God that I have a problem with. It's not Santa Claus that I have a problem with. It's your credibility. I don't believe you when you tell me there is such a thing as God, just like I don't believe you when you tell me there is such a thing as Santa Claus, just like I don't believe you when you tell me that some other human can have the right to rule me if they just go through the right rituals and circumstances. And if they know the right people. Yeah, it doesn't work that way. Atheists are sane people who understand the difference between their own imaginations and reality. Think about that, and thank you for watching.